It's time now for Mark Meets, and this evening one of the most experienced and respected politicians in the country and one of the founding fathers of Brexit, Dr. Liam Fox, the Conservative Member of Parliament for North Somerset and former Secretary of State for International Trade and Secretary of State for Defence. Liam Fox studied medicine at the University of Glasgow and worked as a GP and civilian army doctor before entering Parliament in 1992, and the rest is history. Dr. Liam Fox, welcome to the studio.
Thanks very much.
Great to have you here. First of all, congratulations are in order. CPTPP, which is a fantastic trade bloc that we're part of, which I think amounts to about £12 trillion worth of potential trade. Biggest trading bloc in the world now, bigger than the EU. You began negotiations for this deal in 2018.
Well, it's great to see it signed by Kemi today. The potential is because it's the fastest growing bloc in the world. The potential is what it offers to us in the future rather than the snapshot of where it is today. Although, as Kemi Badenoch said this morning, this is an empowering agreement. It takes British businesses to want to use it for us to maximise the benefit in terms of exports, although there's also the benefit in terms of investment. CPTPP countries already employ in Britain around 400,000 people. This makes the investments in Britain easier, so it's likely to attract yet further investment to Britain. And remember that in terms of value of investments and in terms of jobs created by overseas investments into Britain, we are the top country in Europe.
No, it's fantastic news, and we still have tariff-free trade with the EU. People forget that. They think because of Brexit we somehow don't trade with the EU or we've got massive costs or whatever. You know, we know that there are issues, but in the end we're now trading with the world. That was the promise of Brexit. What do you say to those who sort of bandy this figure around that Brexit is going to cost the British economy 4% and that the benefits of this new deal that you began negotiations for will give us about 0.08%?
I take all of this with a big pinch of salt because I remember what we were told before the referendum. I remember George Osborne as Chancellor saying it would cost 500,000 jobs, the CBI saying it would cost 1 million, the Lib Dems 3 million jobs. We actually have reduced our unemployment rate from 4.7 to 3.9% since we left the European Union, and we've added 1 million jobs to our economy. In terms of growth, France has grown 8.8%, Britain 8.7%, Germany 8.1%. Italy 6.1%, so clearly it's not having an effect on our growth the way that was predicted. And by July 2022, not only were our exports to the European Union the highest since Brexit, they were the highest ever.
Yes, it's amazing. The exports to the EU are up and exports to the rest of the world are up. It is working, and that's in the backdrop of a global pandemic, an energy price crisis as a result of the war in Ukraine and other factors. Overall, though, notwithstanding that, how do you feel Brexit is going? Because many of your colleagues on the back benches are not happy that Brexit has been fulfilled. They're not happy about Northern Ireland, and they're not happy about a lot of EU rules and regulations still in place.
Well, that's a very legitimate worry to have because, as I was mentioning, those countries, France, Germany, Italy, in terms of their growth rate, if you look at the United States at the same time, it's 14.4%, considerably more than any European country, which suggests to me that the European economies are not as competitive as they ought to be. We should now be looking to see which parts of those regulatory inheritances that we had from Europe we can jettison to make ourselves as competitive an economy as the United States.
Are you disappointed? Do you feel that the Brexit potential has not been tapped into? I mean, yes, we're out. No free movement, control of our borders policy, control of our cash, no more ever closer union, no payments of £2 billion a month.
That sounds a pretty good list to me.
It's not a bad list, is it? But many people, I've got viewers and listeners who just think it's still not a real Brexit. They don't feel life has changed.
Well, life has changed immediately. I was someone who wanted to leave for constitutional reasons. I believe that in the United Kingdom, we should choose who makes our laws. So therefore, for me, Brexit was achieved the minute we left. And I think for many people that was the case. But you also have to remember, just as we got Brexit over the line, we were hit by the pandemic. And that's had a big impact on global trade, apart from anything else, not least in supply chains and so on. And it will take a little while for that to unravel. Meanwhile, we should be looking to see where we can find the opportunities in the world's growing markets, not just, as I said, for exports, but also for investment from those, because they will generate jobs in Britain. And ultimately, the measure of Brexit will be, in the longer term, will be, did the government of the day, of whatever party, use the freedoms that Brexit gave them to maximise the prosperity of the British people.
What are the percentage chances that in the next 10 years Brexit will play out very badly and there will be pressure for us to rejoin? Do you see that happening?
No, I don't think the British people are ever going to buy into a European project that is based on ever closer union, that will increasingly take our sovereignty away from us. It would require us to join Schengen, so there would be completely free movement.
And
so
we'd have to take the euro.
And we would have to join the euro, but it would mean that people who got into the southern border of Greece, for example, would legitimately be able to come to the United Kingdom.
What would you say to those businesses who are struggling, though? They've given up exporting, some of them. They've got extra costs. They can't get hold of certain materials as quickly as they used to. The people who are Democrats, they accept the result, but are suffering as a result of Brexit. What would you say to them?
Well, some businesses who have traded exclusively with Europe will have some of those frictions. But that's not the majority of our companies. Very few British companies only export to the European Union. Most will export to worldwide, including the European Union, or they'll be exporting services which don't fall under goods. So my advice would be to try to look for other markets and try to encourage.
Would that not enrage them? Could that not be quite insulting?
Well, it's not insulting. It's to say, if you're having trouble, try and find other markets that you can also use. And we should still be working with the European Union to try to iron out any of the wrinkles, because it works in both directions. Free trade is a win-win. And to maintain restrictions between us doesn't actually suit either party.
Now, you've had a very long and distinguished career in politics, and you've been a cabinet minister, and you are one of the chief architects of Brexit as well, and this amazing trade deal today, CPTPP, and many other things. You were really the flag bearer for Britain as a sort of global economic force when you were in the cabinet. And you've actually had a couple of tilts at becoming leader of the Conservative Party. You've got lots of fans out there. Any regrets that you didn't get the top job?
Well, I suppose you always regret if you go for something and don't get it, and you think of how you could have shaped things. But, you know, you take politics, you take the rough with the smooth. And I've been very lucky. I was a minister in John Major's government, as a minister in David Cameron's government, as a minister in Theresa May's government. And I think one of the advantages of that is it gives you a long perspective. It gives you also a collective memory that I think is missing too much in politics today. People who come into Parliament for a short time and then leave without getting a long-term view of how our political system works.
I know you're supportive of Rishi Sunak. You're a loyal party man. But if you were Prime Minister, what would you be doing differently to what Sunak currently is?
Well, I think he is doing a great job, and I think he has really steadied the ship. I think he's understood that, given the amount of debt that Britain has, we've got to keep confidence in the markets. That was the main, I think, difference that he had. I think he understands that we've got to set out our policies, explaining them rationally to the voters. And I think he's got to also point out the danger of the Labour Party, because Keir Starmer's been talked a lot about today. And here's a man who only in 2019 told us that Jeremy Corbyn was a perfectly acceptable Prime Minister, a Labour Party that was riddled with anti-Semitism, that was anti-NATO and a unilateral disarming leader in Jeremy Corbyn. So, excuse me if I don't place much faith in Keir Starmer.
Briefly, it's so great to have you in the studio. You must come back again soon, because I love ex-cabinet ministers, because they can be honest and say what they really think. What's next for you? What would you like to do? Would you consider a return to frontline politics?
Well, I want to help the Conservatives to win the next election. I leave it to the Prime Minister to decide what role he thinks that might be best.
Ever the diplomat. Liam Fox, great to have you in your studio. Catch up with you very soon.